need some IT support.
You want to advance the slide to the slides. Can you do that, right?
All right, we're going to get started. A little tough technical difficulties, but we can keep going. All right, the Specialty Crops Inspection Division does a lot of work. We facilitate the marketing of fruits, vegetables, and other specialty crops. We provide grading, inspection, and certification services. We do quite a bit of voluntary audit-based services to verify good agricultural practice or GAP audits. And we also work in conjunction with the industry to create and maintain grade standards. And throughout the grade standards and all of the publications that we use to do that. Each year, SCI inspects billions of pounds of fresh and processed fruits and vegetables. And we inspect last year, over 500 million of fresh and processed products for the Specialty Crop, or AMS Commodity Procurement Program, as well as inspecting rations for the military, food safety verification audits, export certifications, maintaining grade standards, and also reviewing child nutrition labels. As you see, we have a large workforce. It's comprised of federal employees in addition to state employees. Here in the state of Texas, we have the State Cooperative Inspection Program that works with us as partners to conduct a majority of inspections on the ground here. We have 42 locations throughout the United States, and we're headquartered in Washington, D.C. And on the map, you'll see all of our field offices. We have 42, as I mentioned on the last slide. So we're all over the country, and I think this is going to be important as we proceed with the tomato suspension agreement for the industry to know that wherever these inspections need to be done, we're there or very close in most cases. At most of the major border crossing inspection points, we'll have staff there who will be ready to conduct these inspections very quickly. In Texas, in El Paso, Laredo, McAllen, and Brownsville specifically, and up through Arizona and California. The grade standards, so the U.S. grade standards define the quality and condition factors for fresh processed fruits and vegetables. The grade standards gives us a common or uniform definition of what a fresh fruit or vegetable should look like in order to be grade. And in this case, with the tomato suspension agreement, all the tomatoes must meet a U.S. number 2. You see grade assigned to fresh tomatoes depends on various attributes, including size, if it's marked on the box, also scarring, bruising, soft decay, and other quality or condition defects. And as I mentioned, we have number 1, U.S. number 2, and U.S. number 3, and for this particular agreement, tomatoes to pass and to receive a certificate must at least be a U.S. number 2. We certify grade, quality, quantity, and condition of products upon shipping or destination in interstate commerce. Again, fresh fruits and vegetables, nuts, other types of specialty crops, to include even Christmas trees and fresh cut flowers. So we have a wide range of commodities that we look at. Our customers choose the type of inspection service performed when not mandated by a regulation such as products covered under 8E of the Agricultural Marketing Act, or a regulation or an agreement such as the tomato suspension agreement. So initially, here's how the process will work. A truck with subject tomatoes from Mexico will arrive at the U.S. border. At importer's request, U.S. Customs provides conditional release of the load. The load crosses the border and goes to the designated warehouse facility. Importer calls the local USDA office or the state inspection office to request an inspection, and then USDA licensed inspectors provides the inspection and certification. Once the load passes inspection, it's released. Our website has all this information, but this form, as you'll see up here, is one of the ways that you can request an inspection. And this form you can call it in and we can take it over the phone and fill out the information for you, or this form can be faxed or emailed. So those are several methods in which an inspection can be requested by our office. A few things to remember when you're requesting an inspection. Cannot request an inspection on behalf of another applicant, because the person calling is going to be billed for the service. And then once you submit the application or you're calling our office, some of the information that you will need to have handy is the name of the product you want inspected, i.e. tomatoes, number of containers that you want us to come inspect, the location of the product, the lot, purchase order, bill of lading, and the inspection type, quality and condition for the tomato suspension agreement. Under the tomato suspension agreement, USDA will inspect all rounds and Roma tomatoes, including stem-on and grape tomatoes in bulk. When load is available for inspection, the importer would request USDA inspection and pay associated USDA fees. The following fresh tomatoes are excluded from the inspection requirements: tomatoes on the vine, specialty tomatoes, and grape tomatoes in retail packages of 2 pounds or less. USDA inspectors generally complete the inspections within 48 hours. However, at the main ports of entry, such as McAllen, Nogales, and the other ones I previously mentioned, were generally completed that day or within a 24-hour period. We're efficient, we know what we're doing, and we'll be there to help you. And in a lot of major facilities, as a lot of you already know, we already have staff in there ready to go as soon as the loads arrive at the warehouses. USDA will perform inspections and unrestricted certification in accordance with normal practices to determine quality, condition, and grade pursuant to the appropriate USDA standard covering fresh tomatoes and greenhouse tomatoes, and using shipping point tolerances. This slide deck will be available, but this basically gives you kind of the high-level overview of what a U.S. number 1 and a U.S. number 2 minimum requirements would be. So this is going to give you the tolerances and any defects, percentage of damages, and bruising and decay and so forth. But again, this will be available. So sampling. We use a sampling technique in order to try to determine the lot. Everything we report is based on representative sampling. These samples determine the defect present and the overall grade of the lot. A sample can be a carton, a flat, a lug, a crate, or a consumer unit such as bagged apples. There's not really an exact rule to define the number of samples that must be taken, but generally speaking, we start with 1% of the load, or of the lot, and And then it can increase if we're finding decay or if the load is not looking like it may pass, and we could possibly pull more samples at a time. But generally, we start around the 1%, and that has given us a fairly good representative sample. Once samples are analyzed and the defects identified, a certificate is issued, which provides a summary of the results. Certificates can be issued electronically or can be handwritten and delivered in person or by fax. Certificates will list the important aspects of the lot, such as commodity, number of containers, temperature, percentages of defects, and the fees. And then this certificate is the evidence that you need as you go through commerce process. We do charge fees for our services. We are a user fee organization, as most of you know that use us already, which means we do not receive any appropriations from Congress. So we set the fees at the rate in which we'll recover our costs, and we try to keep our fees as low as possible. The link there has all of our fees listed on the website, so you'll be able to go in there and see what your applicable fee would be. One thing I want to point out on there is, based on bullet number 3, if you're being inspected in around this area or at the border area, generally you're just going to have the fee for the inspection. However, if you do bring the load farther away from the border, we have to start to travel to you to do the inspection. That's where additional fees could begin to take effect, like mileage, overtime, and holidays, if we were going to do special inspections on holidays and so on. On this slide, you'll see the contact information to the major offices that we will use to support this operation. Those would be your first line and your first points of contact to ensure that you're getting the proper customer service. And then also, you can contact the Specialty Crop Inspection Division Office, which is on the next slide, up in Washington, D.C., the Operations Center, if you need some additional support. That information was on the last slide. So that's all the slides that we had. I just wanted to, again, provide you with a quick overview of kind of how the process will look and work. And at this point, I wanted to open up the room for your questions. I'm sure there's a lot of very specific questions that are going to pertain to your individual cases or just even overall. So at this time,
there's a mic here in the middle of the room, and I'll float around, and you wave your hand and I'll come find you. Good afternoon, my name is Miguel Zamada, and I do fumigations and other quarantine phytosanitary services. In the past, we have fumigated stuff that comes with bugs, with tomatoes. It happened last year. During these inspections, if a bug is found, are you going to request a fumigation?
I'm sorry, speaking here on behalf of maybe with CDP, but usually, like, if there was a question if a pest is found during this inspection process, I'm sorry, was that the question? Or? Yeah. Okay. I mean, really, that would be like really an answer for USDA with the domestics, with the McAllen office. I really, unfortunately, can't really, speak for them. But once it's really clear through CDP, it's clear to enter commerce. So.
I think I can address that a little bit more. For the purposes of the quality inspection to meet the requirements of the suspension agreement, we're not going to be looking for bugs. We're looking for the minimum quality to meet US number 2 or better. And if our counterparts at the border find something in their inspection process, they may, but that's not the purpose of this inspection.
Hello, my name is Philip Garcia. I'm a customs broker, and since there's going to be increased inspections of tomatoes and other commodities also, will there be an increase in personnel available because on some weeks there could be over 100 loads of tomatoes or more crossing a week. And that coincides with onion season, avocado season, and other commodities that require inspection. And a lot of the, I don't know if you guys are going to be overwhelmed, you're going to have more personnel because there's a lot of volume coming through here.
We did start about approximately 8 months ago with the anticipation of the tomatoes passing with a suspension agreement. We have picked up plenty of personnel. We do have adequate personnel right now. If we need to, we can pick up some, or USDA can help us facilitate with more personnel.
Yeah, I would also add to that, so the state of Texas manages the on-the-ground inspection process, but we have what we call Fed state managers, and at the USDA level, and we provide oversight to them, and we just hired an additional 3 to help kind of oversee this program. So we're confident that we are getting staffed up to the level that's going to be needed to provide the service.
Just to add to that, your counterparts in the Nogales, Port of Entry, and in California at Otay Mesa, we're expecting between those 3 states alone for this program, the addition of maybe as many as 90 graders who would be inspecting product booths on the ground.
90?
Approximately, yes.
Question. How much ever from brokers? Are all the loads of tomatoes already inspected or essential?
All loads of ground and Roma and grape tomatoes in excess of 2 pounds are subject to the agreement.
So it's 100% no?
Yes.
Yeah, the importer has to call.
This is all part of the brown fruit virus, Mr. Beasley? I assume the inspections are because of the brown Rugose fruit virus, or what, why the 100%?
Yes, this is a separate, completely separate issue from the virus that's going on now. This suspension agreement has been in place, it just was previously updated, but 20 years.
Yeah, if there's a long history here, and under the trade remedy laws, the domestic industry can file for relief, and that's what happened here. So as an alternative to paying what could be considered punitive dumping duties, anti-dumping duties, the Mexican growers and the Department of Commerce reached this settlement, this suspension agreement. So in lieu of paying additional punitive duties, the signatories have agreed to sell according to the terms of the agreement. So it actually has nothing to do with pests or anything on that front. It has to do with fair trade as regulated under Section 734 of the law.
I have one other question. If for any reason one of the loads does not qualify, how fast it is for this load to be sent back to Mexico? Sometimes we get delayed, our customers want it back for a reason. So how fast, on the process to go back, can we do this, returns to Mexico? Sometimes, the personnel, it takes time, and our customers, we worry about the product that has to be sent back to Mexico. So what's the time that, with the personnel you guys have?
No, can you repeat the question so that the rest of the room can hear it, please?
Well, the question is that if for any reason the load does not, if for any reason the load does not, meet the qualifications, right? How fast can we send that to Mexico, according to the personnel? We know that sometimes, there are short of personnel on the bridge. So how soon can we get, USDA inspector to have this returning to Mexico? Our clients sometimes they worry that, they want the car back, and the product back into Mexico.
I guess it's all, depending on you all as brokers, getting the paperwork filed and,
I'm going to look with it being returned. This is something that would not be returned under supervision by with CDP. It have to do with I know it's brought up here something like with the initial entry or exporting it out, but this would just be a matter of just working with with the partners up here, or even with or according to with the export lot.
So USDA will not be involved in the return back, so we can just return it and just deal with the Mexican side. that
Right,
right?
yes, but really, like, here, like, yes, I mean, really, this year, this inspection, this new inspection protocol here, it's outside the CCP, it's already been cleared, with us from a federal standpoint.
Okay, I just want to make sure, because, because sometimes customers, they will expect to do this back, and, sometimes we can do it because it's delayed, but the short of personnel. So that's what I want.
I think the short answer would be immediately. If you've got the certificate and a lot failed and you want to return it,
So we don't have to deal with USDA then?
once you've got the certificate from us, our part is done unless you want us to come back and re-inspect it because you're going to recondition it. But otherwise, if you want to send it back, it's your product, send it back.
Right, and it might be that Commerce down the road might be looking for evidence that it was sent back, so you should keep that paperwork in your folder.
The name's Armando Flores, I'm with East Coast Brokercy. We handle a lot of avocados. We've been handling for since the very beginning. When a lot of avocado is rejected, we have to do an IE, a mega exportation. We have to come, of course, be coordinated with the Mexican custom broker, because it's not as simple as we trying to make it sound clear. It has to be planned, and it has to be organized with the Mexican counterpart, the broker on the Mexican side. Now, on the US side, everything comes in, it comes under an entry number. That entry number has to be, if we don't do an IE, then how, will the import specialist or CBP be satisfied just with an export declaration? Because the avocado we do immediate exportations under CBP supervision or the export law and so on.
But for the most part, the tomatoes that are subject to the suspension agreement are not covered under the same regulation as avocados or onions or grapes or citrus, because those all have marketing orders and they're subject to the import section 80, and they have to meet those requirements. The tomatoes, from my understanding, and I'll defer to anyone else who has better information, but once they cross the border, that's immediate delivery from the conversation that we've had with our counterparts at CBP. You're not dealing with marketing.
Well, tomato used to be under AD. They are, right? And eventually, I remember back in years back, all tomatoes used to be inspected. Then suddenly, we started getting a lot of green tomatoes. That's another issue. But on the avocados, we have to clear the entry number. And in order to do it, under CBP, it has to be formal documentation. The SCP will not be accepted. It has to be under in-bond, immediate exportation.
Yeah, I'll defer to Nate and to Noe on that question about the mechanics of that. But I just want you to understand that there's the marketing order, there's certain tomatoes that are subject to the marketing order during its effective time period, and the tomato suspension agreement, which are two separate entities.
And the other things, besides being exported, you can always donate it to a food bank or destroy it under the USDA CBP supervision. Or recondition it. There's four things we should do.
Any other questions? Come over here and then be back there. So when we were going over the standards, you mentioned a size grade. But for aromas and grape tomatoes, I understand there is not a size grade. So how would you inspect those two items, not having failed?
They're exempt from size.
All right, so that's one question. The other question was really quick. When we filed the form, the SC 237, for the purpose of the suspension agreement, is there any difference in how we would file it versus a regular inspection for any other product?
We're in talks with USDA, probably use the same request for inspection that we've been using for years. That's probably what we're gonna end up doing, which is being emailed to us.
Thank you. Yes, going back to the question on the forms. For the purpose of the tomato suspension agreement, you're going to be requesting the SE 237. But for the tomatoes that are currently under the AE marketing agreement, those, the local, actually each port has different forms that they request, and those are tied in to an entry number. So, to my understanding, anything that's to do with this inspection will not be tied into the entry. It will not be subject to re-exportation if it fails, or CBP will somehow have a unique identifier to link it to it. Is that correct? And the second part to my question is, in the case where, let's say you do have a tomato that's subject to the AE marketing and also subject to this, will there have to be 2 requests for inspections?
No, you put it all under one, and that would be sufficient enough.
Okay, and in the case
But
where
we will require the entry number
you will require the entry number for all of them.
in order to track it. Yes.
Okay, because the SC 237 form does not. It only requires a lot number, invoice number, and whatnot. So will there be an updated form or to add it so you can track it down? And if you are going to be tracking the entry number, that goes back to what the gentleman here in green was saying. Because I remember under the original or the last tomato suspension agreement, when there was a rejection, it has to be exported with an inbound and under supervision.
No, you'll have several options. You want to let me know about that?
Well, I mean, under the old agreement, you had to export it, you had to maintain evidence, but there was not, there weren't the same kind of requirements necessarily that there are now. For instance, like this, the destruction being certified by a USDA inspector, but, and, you know, some things have changed on the amount that's allowed for, and the way the reconditioning is done, but you need to maintain the evidence so that the inspection certificate, the agreement is not designed to change, you know, the USDA inspection certificate, but rather that inspection certificate or how things are done, that's going to be maintained in the file so that if there's a question on a shipment, if Commerce is looking at violations and things, they would be able to get all of the documentation in one place. So, you know, they'll be looking to make sure that the inspection documents the amount of adjustments that were given, evidence that the truck was turned around if it was, or the certification of, you know, USDA inspector witnessing the destruction.
Okay, so then regardless if it's an AE marketing regulated tomato and also a tomato under this new one, it'll be just the one inspection. And in the case where it is rejected, it will have to be re-exported. You will have to maintain proof. In the case when it's a tomato that's also regulated by the AE. But in the case where it's not, then you don't.
If you will have the same opportunity as AE where you're able to recondition it and then destroy what the calls, and then will be re-inspected afterwards to be able to get that load.
And I understand that on the
on
reconditioning.
both.
I'm talking about the re-exportation because there's a lot of room or margin for error because there will be occasions and very frequent, I suspect, where it's the same type of tomato that's regulated by AE and also regulated by this new inspection. So is there any way we can get some clarification? Because I
Well,
know that
they've been coexisting for the 20 years of the agreement, I think. I mean, has the Mexican, or has the tomato, federal marketing program tomatoes been around that long, right?
Yeah.
So they have coexisted. You know, the Mexican tomato suspension agreement covers all tomatoes brought in from Mexico from a signatory, which is, you know, 99.99%. So that coexistence has happened before.
Oh, no, I understand that. I understand that. And maybe I'm not making it clear or trying to get the point that I'm trying to get across is before it was only, regardless of the tomato suspension agreement, before it was only AE marketing, right? And if it was rejected, okay, it had to be re-exported and you required proof of export. Now you have this new inspection under the tomato suspension agreement that, from my understanding originally, is that it will not be required to be re-exported under in-bond or under supervision. So in the case when it's a tomato, again, that falls under both, what will be the procedure?
So if I understand your question, are you asking if there's going to be two separate inspections?
Well, that was my first question, and you answered that, no, it's just gonna be one, correct?
Correct.
So in the case where it is failed or rejected, and it falls under the two, under the AE and under the tomato suspension, then it will have to re-export it under in-bond and supervision. But in the case when it's a tomato that's not subject to AE, but is subject only to the tomato suspension, it will not have to be re-exported under supervision, under bond.
So according to the agreement, your options if you have a failed load is return to Mexico, destroy it, or recondition it. And if you recondition it, you will then have to have it re-inspected by USDA.
But if you return it, you're right, I think so, you're saying there are extra requirements for the tomatoes subject to
Yes,
the marketing order.
and especially the CBP,
Right,
the marketing order is tied into the entry.
Right, those still apply, absolutely, the agreement didn't change that. I would say that the suspension agreement from Commerce does not have that exact level of detail, but so the truth is when you're exporting them for purposes of the marketing order, you're going to have the proof that the Commerce Department needs to see that they were exported, because you would have that sort of information. But if they're tomatoes that come in July, for instance, when you're not under the marketing order, you have to meet the requirements of the suspension agreement and demonstrate that they were re-exported.
Okay, so it's recommended, or would you recommend that all tomatoes that are rejected, regardless, are re-exported under supervision, and you have that proof of either in-bond or some type of government stamp on it?
Well, that's not actually our role, because that would be a commerce enforcement thing. So, in terms of what they're going to be looking for later, it's always best to, best to confirm with them. But from our perspective, as USDA, the AP requirements stand. So those you have to take care of. In terms of what Commerce is going to be expecting to see as evidence when there's not the marketing order in place, what are they looking to see? That's a question better directed towards the Commerce Department.
And I will follow up with Commerce with this specific question because it's not one that we had necessarily anticipated. But I just want to go back. When you're requesting the inspection, you're just going to use the standard 237 or request the inspection the way you always have. I would suggest that it would be a good idea to include the entry number on all of those requests because we're going to need that to track those lots to make sure we're inspecting the product that we're supposed to. And then we're going to have our state counterparts or whoever's performing the inspection make notation of that entry number on the certificate so that it can be referenced. And it would probably be a good idea to make a notation of what type or why you're requesting the inspection. Is it for AD or is it for tomato suspension agreement?
Yes, on the tomato suspension agreement, if they're mixed and there's some lots that are 3s and 2s, can they rerun those on a suspension agreement? And if they meet 2s and then the rest be destroyed or sent back to Mexico, what is the rule on that?
They can be destroyed under our supervision or be sent back to Mexico with holes if they don't make the number 2 grade, at least the number 2 grade.
Can you run them?
Yeah, you can run them, you can recondition.
Just going back, nowadays everything is done electronically. So if a sample does not make grade, and believe me, in 5 or 6 months, someone watching this from one of their auditors is going to call me the truth, and going to request a copy of that inspection, or what happened to the balance, or what happened to if there was something that did not make grade, what happened to those cartons. So, just always keep in mind that entry number is very important, and you need to check if they make grade or not. Because a lot of times, we're human. there's errors that are done also, so, just from this past experiences, you know, we're always getting calls.
But, you know, that certificate that will be issued to the applicant or to the importer, if that truckload has done, let's say, half of the load pertains to U.S. commerce, the other part pertains to 8E, more than likely you will have A and B lots on that certificate. If A lot, for example, is 8E commodity, well then it will tell you there. It will give you the grade, and it will tell you if it matches to its import under 8E. B lot is e-commerce under 640. It will tell you what grade it made number 2 or better, you can commerce.
I think one important point here is that even if they're 8E, if it's tomato, it is still subject to the Mexican tomato suspension agreement and has to be sold in accordance with the terms of the agreement. So there's not an either or, it's just the suspension agreement covers all Mexican tomatoes, and then 8E, those subjects are a subset of that. So, and I'm saying that more with respect to the requirements of the agreement down the road, that under the trade laws, it covers all tomatoes from Mexico from the signatory. So you're still, even if they're subject to the marketing order, you're still subject to the price requirements and all the other requirements.
Right.
Yep.
Questions? If you're thinking it, there's probably 10 other people that are thinking it.
Now, if something like that would happen, they can also state on the remarks, if the importer suggests that he's gonna send those tomatoes back, he can state something on the remarks that happens to state, you return to Mexico. And that also give a little proof that he's going back to Mexico. Yeah, we also use it in the network.
I know you guys mentioned earlier that you had an adequate amount of employees. My biggest concern is, just in this room alone, I've already counted 7 pretty significant imported tomatoes. I can imagine on a busy day, anywhere from 40 to 60 loads of Roma, so many more tomatoes in general, any given shipper. You guys gonna have enough inspectors? I would imagine the inspectors will be there on site all day. How many, inspectors have you guys added since, I guess in the past 8 months?
We were about 20 something. Now we're close to about 70 right now. Some of these busy sheds that have, X amount, 30, 20, 25, 30, you probably more than likely will have inspectors reporting to your warehouse daily, first thing in the morning.
And it'll be more than one. You'll have 2 or 3, depending on your load capacity that's coming in, you'll be adding this staff.
So I'm understanding we have 48 hours to have for the inspection, is that correct?
No, that's on, I think usually on the receiving end. It will get done within the 24 hours. Probably, we're usually out there within the, I would say, within the hour. I think Art, are you around here? Art, in the past, we were looking at quite a bit of tomatoes there. You want to let them know how we handled all your loads?
How you doing, everybody? Our selling has been since 2001. A while back, we did do quite a bit of inspections, mostly all rounds. These guys are pretty quick to do their job, very easy to communicate with. From what we spoke about before this meeting, they do have adequate personnel. It's really quite simple, yet a little bit complicated. Basically, if it makes grade, you're good to go. If it does not, you recondition and have it re-inspected. The coals can be dumped, thrown away, but under, obviously, USDA supervision. And then the rest, the rest of the stuff that you do with the remaining balance of the load is under, Department of Commerce. You got to follow the suspension agreement. So, speaking with Nobi earlier, a little while ago, my first question was, are we going to have enough personnel? He assured me that immediately. I know a lot of people in here are concerned with that because I know Miami sitting in here, I know Calabar sitting here, I know GR sitting in here, I know Eric sitting in here. We all process a significant amount of tomatoes per day. So we already have an inspection or possible inspection for the rugoso virus. Now we have another inspection going to take place April 1st. A lot of us are probably thinking, how much time is that going to take from us? Time is money. So I have a good amount of faith in what I've seen in the past and what I'm seeing now as far as prepping for this situation. I really think that it should run pretty smooth, and it's like I said, a simple but delicate process, and it's cut and dry, and some of us will probably have an inspector basically living at our shed now that we have to inspect everything. The 24-hour deal, I don't want my tomatoes on hold. I like to in and out. I can't eat that many tomatoes, so I like to sell them instead. And so that being said, I have faith in these guys, and as soon as they show up, I think there's by the time we get closer to April 1st, I think a lot of the questions that we have are going to be answered. A lot of the doubts are going to be answered. This is all new, pretty much to everybody that's not, didn't used to just say, well, brown tomatoes, because that's all that would be inspected. So basically, in a nutshell, it's just something that we're going to have to get used to. We're going to have to be on top of things. Our personnel's going to have to be on top of things. And we're going to have to report with USDA immediately what's in transit, so we can get them out there, get them inspected, and get them out the door and sold. Basically, that's it. That's my opinion about it. I did have a question, if you will indulge me. Let's say a shipper, there's very good shippers in here that I've looked around and I've noticed. If a shipper, for instance, has, I don't know, a batting average of 1,000, 100 loads come in, 100 loads get checked, 100 loads cross, and are US 1 or 2, do we stop inspecting every single one, or no matter what, every single one?
Everything's gonna get inspected.
All right then, that's it then.
Yeah, until, that's up to Commerce if they change.
If they change, any kind of allowances or any kind of good track records, good behavior, et cetera, but as of now, it doesn't matter if about 1,000, you're gonna get checked.
Yep.
And if you don't pass, then you need to do the right thing as far as reconditioning or destroying under supervision of the USDA. Correct?
Yeah, and let me just reiterate again, with the 48 hours, those are the rare circumstances when an inspection is being requested of us and we're nowhere near the border, where we don't have people. We're gonna get the one-offs in Butte, Montana or something, and we gotta get somebody up there, and that's when that time frame is looking like. But the places down here, same business day, generally speaking. So, and we've got a good track record of that, and we're ready to meet it. And even with the staffing issues, if we find that we're short, we'll continue to add people. We're going to be assessing this every day, and until we know that we've got a system down and that it's working for the industry. So.
Yeah, I had a question about direct shipments. Currently, our customers who do avocados will get the federal inspection in Dallas, and they'll come all the way from Mexico. So we do a lot of direct shipments right now for the tomatoes.
As per the suspension agreement, all imported from the border will have to get inspected here at the border first.
Are there any PACO-related questions? I think Jeff's office and the Novellis office have gotten a few so far. Obviously for PACO, we're looking at the inspection that happens at the destination, and that's not going to change. It's just the thing that changes from the way the agreement was is just some of the math. What's allowed under the agreement for adjustments. So it continues to be that if the seller informs the buyer that the sale is subject to the suspension agreement, then PACA considers the suspension agreement an integral part of the contract. So that's not changing. You all have been operating under that for a very long time. But some of the mechanics and nuts and bolts of how things can be claimed where will have changed, but we're just, PACA's just adopting the rules of the suspension agreement because that's what, those are the terms of the contract, and we're there to enforce the contract. So if there are any particulars, we have our regional offices. You have Jeff with his office in Fort Worth, we've got the Nogales, or the office in Tucson that takes care of Nogales, that covers most of the border, and then our other office in Virginia. But if there's any packet questions, please, even if you don't have them now, you can reach out to us, and we'll get responses to you.
Judy, maybe you could cover maybe the one or two most popular questions or most frequent questions that you have been getting packet related.
Well, so far, we've been getting questions about, is it happening yet? So, you say, no, the inspection requirements kick in when they kick in. One of the changes is on the allowable condition defects. I don't know if Commerce has posted it yet on their website, but they're removing the claim adjustment form. And it used to be that if the, let's say you had 1,000 boxes and there was 30% condition defects that were allowable under the agreement. And you know though that they have changed that a little bit, that now, puffiness, there's a couple of changes in what's an allowable defect. So make sure you're aware of those and your, the people handling your claims are. But if it used to be that when you could bill back, if the receiver could bill back the entire amount of the USDA inspection fee. So one of the changes in the new agreement is that is the amount of the inspection fee is capped. So I'm just going to use easy numbers for easy math. You've got 1,000 boxes, you've got 30% condition defect. So 30% are not sold. You've got a $100 USDA inspection. All that can be billed back of that $100 fee is $30. Because that's the inspection, the amount of the inspection is exactly the percentage of the allowable condition defects. It's kind of a small change in terms of the actual money mechanics, but it's one that's gotten a lot of questions, I think, both with us and with the Commerce Department.
We have a couple more questions back here.
Good afternoon, Jose Luis with Bebo. Just have a simple question. It's just like normally, like the time frame for the regular inspection is from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. At 5 p.m. the overtime kicks in. I wanted to ask, and Saturdays as well, it's overtime all day, and Sundays as well. Is there going to be any change from that due to that, like, there's a lot of tomato people here that have plenty of loads coming in that normally works on Saturdays, and that's actually an extra thing that we're going to have to be paying for. Or you're going to spend hours, or that keeps the same way?
No, the cost is going to be the same. The mileage, we use our fees. It is just a cost recovery. It is at 58 cents for the mile and at $20 an hour. That's, that's been in place for a good while. It will be the normal procedure as the regular inspections.
Could you please explain again
Could you please explain again the part about the amount that's allowed to be deducted in the inspection if it's only 30%?
The way the agreement's written now, the allowable amount for the adjustment, or for the money associated with the inspection fee is the same percentage as the condition defect allowance. So under the 2013 agreement and a prior agreement, if you were giving, okay, let's go back to basic math, right? $10. So my 1,000 boxes, 30% condition defect, $10 a box. Okay, so then you would be allowed under that. You would, and it's $100 for the inspection certificate. So the receiver has to pay the receiver has to pay 700 boxes at $10 a box, and they can only take back $30 on that inspection fee. They can't deduct out the whole $100 for the inspection fee. And under the old agreement, you could. And I know Commerce was in the process of updating their calculation worksheets. It's actually, I think the new agreement's a little simpler in terms of not having, some of the repacking, some of those allowances are not allowed anymore, and that's all Commerce's territory. But getting familiar, it's a much simpler calculation now. But it is capping the amount of the inspection fee.
Just, sorry, make sure you're clear. This is not the inspection at the border.
I understand, it's a destination. But I understood that part to be more whether you had 1,000 boxes, that maybe 500 were a certain lot, like extra large size, and the other 500 were large. And only the 500 large failed and the inspection was $100, you would only be allowed to deduct the $50 for the large, for example, but not based on the percentage of defects or anything. I was not aware of that at all. I hadn't even heard it anywhere.
I guess when you're getting into, it, you know, it is capped. I mean, you can't have, under the agreement at destination, which is the ones CAFA's concerned about, you cannot, you know, you have to have sort of your denominator is your unrestricted inspection quantity, right? So, like back to my 1,000 boxes. So, but when PAC is looking at the claims and where it all comes out under a PACA claim, we're going to follow those literal requirements of the agreement, which caps the amount of the inspection fee.
Thank you.
My question is on the inspections at destination. It seems like there are some markets where the inspectors are notorious for failing the mail. So we're able to appeal inspections, but they can't return them to us, and we can move them, and even if they fail the inspection there and they pass somewhere else, we can't do that, right?
My understanding in the agreement, the original inspection stands unless it's appealed and reversed.
Okay, but if we decide to appeal it, but, I mean, we don't have an option to either appeal it or take it back anymore. It either has to be appealed or it has to be destroyed, right? Or can you?
Reconditioned.
Or reconditioned at the destination.
Right.
Okay, we're sure that our lot is good after it was inspected already at the border, and there's no way that the defects that were checked in the border are gonna evolve or go be worse in a 2-day ride. We don't have an option to take it back or.
So the inspection that takes place here for the suspension agreement or for AE doesn't have any impact on your destination inspection. That's a completely separate entity, and you're always afforded the opportunity to appeal those results. Now,
to dealerships where
generally it needs to take place in the same location under the same market, or if we can tie it to the same truck and it didn't travel a significant amount, because if it's out on Bruising or Soft and you take it from Philadelphia to Boston, chances are it's going to have more defects in it. So we may not honor the appeal request in that case, but you always have the right to appeal.
Okay. Second question is on the cost. It says additional lots of the same product. What's an additional lot of the same product?
A lot of it, if it's different containers, it's the same product, but different types of containers, that's basically what it is. The containers such as flats, RPCs, 20 pounders, 25 pounders.
If we bring overweight, let's say 22 pallets, or we bring 2 pallets of carton and 2 pallets of RPC, we're gonna pay $96 for those 2 pallets?
If it was unloaded somewhere else,
no.
If the load is all the same, no, I mean, if it's all the same type of container,
it's not.
So if you've got 25 pounders in RPCs, yes, that's going to be 2 lots.
Yes.
Okay. The same thing applies if you have multiple brands. We have to distinguish those as individual lots.
Multiple brands?
Yes.
So we bring one truckload with 2 brands on it, it's 2 lots?
Yes.
Even if it's-
And that's always been the rule.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
just one follow-up, I found it in the agreement. If the particulars of the second inspection are in Appendix D, Section A, number 4. So there when it's talking about the field inspection.
What about super lots? Are each rows all the same lot?
At some point, but because of the scale of this program, and that it's gonna be brand new to basically all of us, we're not even gonna entertain the idea of super lots until we know the problems, and we know we're gonna encounter some kind of problems down the road. So, you know, also, we asked Commerce, and they allowed us to not implement this for 6 months so that we could ramp up, so that we could hire, so we could train. We've got to do outreach in Nogales and in California as well, and help those offices get to the appropriate staffing and make sure we've got a competent training program in place. We're going to be basically starting this in the middle of the season. That's going to be challenging enough. We'll evaluate what issues we saw, you know, when the bulk of the season winds down, when it starts slowing down in the summertime, fine tune it. I have to say, I wouldn't be willing to entertain super lots until we have a full season under our belt and know the challenges that we're facing. So far, the super lot program has worked out well for table grapes in Nogales. I think we still have to do some review before we don't call that a pilot program anymore, and it's now policy. But we have to look at this commodity by commodity so that we don't get ahead of ourselves, and then we've got a royal mess that we can't deal with.
You have a question in the back?
Yeah, my name is Omero Cardenas with Traveler Produce, and I just had a question. Can you elaborate a little bit more on how the process is going to work with the inspections on product that's regraded? How is that process going to work?
No, I don't think that's about the regrades.
Are you saying the recondition?
Yeah, reconditioned product. How is you say that once the product, let's say, is going to be reconditioned, you mentioned something about that product is going to be inspected as well once it's reconditioned. How is that process going to work? Do we go through the same process as we did initially?
Yes, same process. We're going to go back out to your warehouse and inspect it again. And with all the calls, we would have to supervise it being destroyed. And then once we do the re-inspection, and if it passes, you're good to go.
Okay.
Of course, you would have to provide the original certificate so we can cross-reference that particular note.
But we'd have to, resubmit the form and all that good stuff.
Yes.
And what about the, the product that's lost? Are you going to supervise that it's dumped?
Yes, yes. You're gonna, when you do the same process, you're gonna put the amount that was left over, which is the good tomatoes, and then we'll take it from there and making sure everything matches with the original amount.
Yeah, are we getting what type of forms are you going to require? Are you going to require dump receipts, or what type of forms are going to be involved here?
On the dumping, we would supervise it, and then we will record it on the certificate.
Okay.
Additional questions? I have just one more. Going back to the one that they asked a moment ago. So let's say we're bringing in a load of Romas and rounds, but we have a mix of cartons, RPCs between both of them, right? So let's say we have a fourth of RPC round Romas, a fourth of carton Romas, and then same way on the rounds. So that would make it 4 different lots? That's what you're ready to say, right? Okay.
Each lot will stand on its own.
Even though it's the same invoice, same entry, same everything?
Yes.
You guys are gonna separate it
By lots.
Okay, thank you.
And that is the norm. That's where we do onions, and that's where we do avocados.
Additional questions?
Someone had come up to me and asked if these tomatoes, if they're cartons, do they have to be marked as to what they are? Romas?
house or no? And they have to be marked on the box.
The suspension agreement has marking requirements, including saying that they were grown by signatory to the 2019 suspension agreement with the signatory number. So, yes, check one of the changes, before the controlled environmental, the agreement did away with that. So that's different, but that's specifically laid out in the agreement. So make sure that you follow those requirements to.
But it doesn't, yes.
Yeah.
They do have to be marked.
Yes.
As to what they are, correct?
Yes.
Yes, I believe I saw that. I just want to make sure we clarify that because a lot of people were asking on the market.
Questions? Over.
Oh, okay, simple. I have 25 feet coming from Mexico, 10 RPCs and 10 cargo of different sizes. How many inspections or how does that mean?
As long as the sizes are comparable in their condition and quality, they will get.
They could say the same lot, the different sizes? 10 RPCs and 10 cargo, so it's only two.
Basically, that's two lots.
No matter the size.
Doesn't matter about the sizes, doesn't really matter about the growers. As long
Same
as the
label,
condition,
same label,
as long as the quality and condition are comparable. But if we have, say you bring in 6 7s, you got 5 6s, 6 6s and 6 7s. If the 6 7s are markedly different than the other two lots, we're going to separate those out.
Questions coming to the back?
Going back to the procedures and going back to the form, because you're using this SC 237 form and that's a standard. But you mentioned earlier that you're going to be working with local USDA or your state partners to keep on utilizing the same form that's always been utilized. Are you going to be working in that manner with each port and each of your local partners, going, let's say, Nogales or Santa Mesa? Or is there a way that it can be a standardized form for all the ports that will include the entry number with the same process, the same procedures? Or are you going to leave it to each port and each local state partner to handle it however they see fit?
Yeah, they should be all doing it relatively close to the same, using the same forms. They're all under our guidance. They're all acting under our authority. The SC 237 is our form, so they should all be using it, whether you're calling it in, faxing it in, emailing it to them. It should be a standard process. If it's not, see me after this meeting and I'll see if I can address it.
Thank you.
Coming forward. Just to make it clear, it's going to be on inspector discretion if a load of, let's say, around 4 5s, same label, carton box, to separate the sizes. Because somebody mentioned that if it's 6 6 and 6 7s, they're going to count as the same lot.
It will be at the same lot, but if there's if one of your sizes fails, we will separate your lot, that particular size, and go ahead and clear the remainder of the load.
Only fails, but if it's a mix with 4 4s and 4 5, like big sizes.
If it's making like Chip said, if it's making the same grade, comparable, everything's the same, it would be just put together.
On that same note, how far does the range open up to? I mean, can you do like 4 4 4 5 5 5 5 6, or is it just two sides, the one up and the one down?
Everything can be put together if it's all the grade is all the same.
So like single brand, 25 pounds, all the way from 3/4 to like 6 7.
Correct.
And it's a single lot, single line.
Correct.
Perfect. Thank you.
As a general information point, the information on, or the requirements for labeling are in section 7D of the agreement. It's shipping and other arrangements, and specifically 7D 3B says label the boxes with the name, signature ID, that's in there in the agreement. So look under the shipping and other arrangements.
Questions? Is this group, are you guys going to be available for a few minutes following the deal in case there's somebody want to have a private question? Okay, any other questions here from the group? So you heard these folks will be available for a few minutes after the close of the session if you have specific questions about your business. We've got to wrap up today's session. I want to thank again the City of Pharr for hosting us, my friends at USDA and TSIP. Thank you guys for your questions and engagement. And on behalf of the Texas International Bridge Association, thank you all for coming today.